I was there when they sealed the Kola Superdeep Borehole. We never should have dug that deep. They're lying about why they stopped drilling. I'm sure you all have heard the story of how we recorded the sounds of hell in that borehole. That story is bullshit. What happened was much worse. I was a junior geologist on the Kola project in 1992, fresh out of university and stupid enough to think I was lucky. The deepest hole ever drilled into the earth, 12,262 meters straight down into the Scandinavian Shield. They told us we were making history. They didn't tell us what we were making history with. The problems started at 12,000 meters. Dr. Azarov was running the night shift when the drill head brought up the first sample of rock from down there. I wasn't there, but I saw the footage later, before they destroyed it. The core rock sample was ordinary granite, but when Azarov set it on the examination table, it was warm. Not hot. Body temperature. It's residual heat from friction, the engineers said. But granite from that depth had never come up warm before. The temperature down there was 180 degrees Celsius, sure, but the samples always cooled during the hour-long ascent. This one hadn't. 3 days later, I was in the drilling room when we heard it. The microphones, we'd lowered them to record the sounds of tectonic stress, the groaning of continental plates. Standard procedure. At 12,200 meters, we started picking up something else. It came through the speakers at 3:47 a.m. Scratching. Not the grind of rock on metal. Not the creak of steel under pressure. Scratching. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Like fingernails on stone. Equipment malfunction, Director Volkov announced, but his face had gone grey. We're pulling the microphones up. They didn't make it back up. At 8,000 meters, the cable went taut. Then it started descending again, pulled from below. We watched the counter tick downward. 8,100 meters. 8,200 meters. Before the cable snapped. Whatever took it was strong enough to break braided steel rated for 5 tons. We should have stopped then. Instead, Volkov ordered us to keep drilling. Equipment gets stuck. We've lost tools before. But I heard him on the phone with Moscow that night, his voice high and terrified. It's not geological. It's not, I don't know what it is, but we need to seal it now. Moscow told him to keep going. At 12,250 meters, the drill bit jammed. Not stuck. Jammed. Like something was holding it. The engineers tried to free it for 6 hours, the motor screaming, until finally it lurched free so violently it nearly tore the derrick down. When they pulled it up, there were marks on it. Not damage from rock. Marks. Long parallel grooves scored deep into tungsten carbide, each one curved slightly like tool wear, Volkov said. But his hands were shaking so badly he dropped the sample. None of us touched it after that. That night, Dmitri disappeared. He'd been working the drilling floor, monitoring the equipment. When his shift ended at midnight, he didn't come up. We found his coat at his station, his thermos still warm. We searched for 8 hours. We found him in the drill shaft. Not at the bottom, not fallen in. He was on the wall, 200 meters down, pressed against the stone like he was trying to climb deeper. His fingers were bloody stumps, nails torn off from clawing at granite. His eyes were open. The medical examiner said he'd been dead for 4 hours, but when we found him, his blood was still wet. And his mouth was full of stone dust, like he'd been trying to eat his way through the rock. The last thing I'll say about Dmitri. When we pulled him up, there was something written on the wall where he'd been, scratched in his own blood, in letters 3 feet tall. They heard. Volkov ordered the borehole sealed that morning. Not filled, Sealed. They brought in specialists from Moscow, men who wouldn't look us in the eye and wouldn't answer questions. They welded a steel plate over the shaft opening, then poured concrete, then added another plate. But first, they lowered one more microphone. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I hid in the equipment room and listened. They sent it down on a self-powered winch, recording the whole way. For the first 11,000 meters, nothing. Silence. At 12,000 meters, the scratching started. Closer now. Louder. Not just one source. Hundreds. Thousands. A symphony of scraping, clawing, dragging sounds that made my teeth ache. At 12,200 meters, the scratching stopped. Then we heard breathing. Not one breath. A chorus of inhalations, all perfectly synchronized, drawing air through the microphone. The sound was wet, ragged, excited. Then the laughter started. I've never heard anything like it. Thousands of voices laughing in perfect unison, a sound so loud it distorted the speakers. But it wasn't joy. It was the laughter of something that had been waiting in the dark for so long it had forgotten what light was. And now finally, it could come up. The laughter rose in pitch, became shrieking, gleeful, hungry. Then something grabbed the microphone. We heard it pulled downward at tremendous speed, the cable screaming, and behind it all that laughter growing louder, closer, echoing up the shaft, as if whatever was down there was screaming in ecstasy. The sound changed as it climbed. The laughter turned into counting in Russian. Each number shouted in that same unified chorus, the voice cracking with excitement. 12,000. A pause, a scraping sound like countless hands finding purchase on stone. 11,000. More scraping, faster now. Something was using the walls, the equipment, the cables we'd left behind, climbing with impossible speed. 10,000. The numbers came faster. The laughter between each one was deafening, ecstatic. 9,000. 8,000. 7,000. Volkov was screaming into his radio, telling Moscow what was happening. But even through the phone, I could hear someone in the Moscow office say, "Jesus Christ, we can hear it here too." 6,000. 5,000. The drilling platform was shaking now, dust falling from the ceiling. That counting, that horrible counting, echoing up from below and somehow also coming from the walls, from the ground, from everywhere. 4,000. 3,000. The winch exploded. The cable shot up from the borehole with such force it embedded in the ceiling. And for just a second before they killed the feed, the microphone was still transmitting. Not from 12,000 meters down anymore. It was at 200 meters. And it was still counting, still laughing. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that the counting had changed. It wasn't counting the depth anymore. It was counting us. 43, 42, 41. 43 people in the facility. Whatever was down there had already counted every single one of us. They sealed the hole in 4 minutes. I've never seen people work so fast. The steel plate went on, then the concrete, then another plate welded on top, all while that counting echoed up from below, getting louder, the numbers dropping. 12, 11, 10. Something hit the underside of the steel plate. The entire platform jumped, then another impact, another. The plate was buckling inward with each hit, and between the impacts we could hear that laughter, that hideous, gleeful laughter, and the counting. 5, 4, 3. The final weld sealed. The laughter stopped. For 5 seconds, there was perfect silence. Then something scraped across the bottom of the steel plate. Slowly, deliberately. 3 parallel lines, like fingers testing the seal. And from below, muffled but clear, we heard a single word in perfect Russian. Soon. It stopped when the final weld cooled. The official story is that the borehole was closed due to budget constraints and high temperatures. The facility was abandoned. Most of the records were destroyed. The few of us who remained were offered very generous pensions with very specific NDAs. But here's what they didn't tell you. 3 weeks after we sealed it, a construction crew drilling a water well in the village of Zapolyarny, 40 kilometers away, hit something at 400 meters. The drill dropped into a void. When they pulled it up, there were those same curved marks on the bit. When they lowered a camera down, they saw something in the darkness. Something with too many arms, moving toward the lens. They sealed that hole too, and the one that opened in Nickel, and another near Murmansk. Last month, my daughter called me from Moscow. Her apartment building is being evacuated. There's a crack in the foundation that opened overnight. It goes down at least 50 meters, they think. Maybe deeper. She said she can hear scratching from below. They're not isolated anymore. The holes are spreading, opening up like pores across the Kola Peninsula. We dug down and woke something up. And now it's not climbing up through one shaft anymore. It's making its own. 3 days ago, I felt the floor vibrate in my apartment in St. Petersburg, 1,400 kilometers from Kola. This morning, there's a crack in my basement floor. It's only a centimeter wide, but when I put my ear to it, I can hear something. It sounds like digging, getting closer. I called Volkov to ask what we should do. He didn't answer. When I drove to his house, the front door was open. There was a hole in his kitchen floor, perfectly round, going straight down into darkness. On the wall, written in something dark and wet, "We heard you too." I'm writing this from my car. I don't think I can outrun it. I don't think anyone can. But I need someone to know the truth before the holes open up under cities, under schools, under your house while you sleep. We didn't stop drilling the Kola borehole because of budget cuts or heat. We stopped because we realized the drilling sound we'd been making for 12 years. It was knocking. And something finally answered the door. If you're reading this, and you feel your floor vibrate, if you hear scratching under your home, if you see a crack that wasn't there yesterday, run. But I don't think running will help anymore. They heard us. All of us. Every footstep, every foundation, every mine and tunnel and basement and subway. And now they're coming up. The crack in my basement is 3 meters wide now. Last night, I heard laughter coming from it. The same laughter from the microphone 30 years ago. And then very clearly, I heard counting. Starting at 43. Counting down. Me and my buddy's Christmas trip took a turn for the worst. Hey folks, just wanted to say I'm probably going to jail. Not really my fault, but heck, shit happens. Pretty sure I did everything just right. Everything that I could. Oh well. So, to begin, I'm from a small town in Montana. Like, real small. Right up by Canada. Lots of mountains, a national park, you know the kind of place. Now, my best bud is, or was, I guess, Billy. Now, Billy's dad and my dad were friends when they was kids. So, me and Billy have grown up together. Closer than brothers, thick as thieves. Man, I wish he hadn't had his head blown off. Anyways, my dad and Billy's dad used to have this tradition for a couple of years when they was young. In the winter, during deer season, they take a bunch of guns, deer tags, booze, fireworks, and food up to this cabin in the mountains, get wasted, and spend a few days hunting and blowing off steam. Now, me and Billy had been planning to reenact the trip since we were about 15. Only complication is that I went and got myself a girlfriend. Now, I love Jenny, but this was supposed to be a boys-only trip. She put her foot down, though, said someone needed to keep an eye on us. She also may have questioned the nature of mine and Billy's relationship, and implied we were going to the cabin to explore each other's bodies more than the mountains. Now, we're pretty open-minded folks, but reverse psychology like that is extremely effective on a pair of young men who live in a rural, God-fearing community, so we agreed to let Jenny come along. So, near Christmas, I snuck out of the house into the bracing snow, got in my car, which I'd already filled with supplies when Dad was at work, and made my way to the gas station, where Jenny and Billy would be waiting. Billy was there first, a towering, gorilla-like figure with a few long bags, a big smile beaming at me from his beard. "Hey, bud," he said, slinging the bags in as he clambered into the car. It was already a tight squeeze, just with my stuff. Hey, I said. "You brought the good stuff?" "Hell yeah,
What the hell is this?"
A new voice called. I leaned out, and there was Jenny. She looked beautiful, even with her big snow jacket and ski pants on. Hey, girl, what's the problem?" I called, a bit unsettled by the edge in her voice.
You said truck. I thought you were going to borrow your dad's.
I looked at the steering wheel. What's wrong with the Neon? They weren't bad little cars. A bit underpowered, especially the 1.6, and I guess they are front-wheel drive. And then there's the 3-speed, which does slip a lot. And sometimes the electrics short out the engine. But other than that, it's a pretty good car.
You really want to drive up to a cabin you've never been to, in the dark, in the snow and ice, in a fucking Dodge Neon?
Jenny asked, sounding not quite happy with me. It'll be fine. It gets us to and from school, don't it? Billy added. Jenny swung open the rear door, chucking in her backpack and sitting on top of it.
School ain't up a damn mountain.
I shrugged, yanking the stick into drive, and we set off with a lurch up the dark and snowy road to the mountains. Didn't bring your phone, did you? Billy said, craning round to grin at Jenny.
No, you said not to,
she said.
And what's the deal with that? No reception up here?
Probably is, I said, keeping my eyes on the road as it snaked ever upwards. But back when our dads was young, they didn't have phones. Just did it all with paper maps. Billy chuckled. That's right, proper men. Back then, just a couple of dudes living wild. Jenny kicked the back of my seat real hard, and she glared at me in the mirror from behind her black curls.
You seriously mean we haven't got one cell phone between us?
I smiled at her vicious expression in the mirror. That's right, I say. We're going to do it just like they did back in the day. Me and Billy exchanged a triumphant grin.
So how the hell are we getting there without Google Maps? You have a paper map then?
Mine and Billy's expression fell instantly. I can't read a map, Billy said. I can, but I didn't have one. I'm sure it'll be fine. After all, how hard can it be to find a cabin on the mountain? So, turned out finding a cabin on a mountain after dark, when the snow started coming down hard, was actually pretty tough. Got even tougher further up, because the Neon kept sliding and slipping. It was getting real hard to make headway. Luckily, we had the heaters on full blast, so it was plenty warm inside. I just wish I'd remembered to fill it up when we met at the gas station. That had been the whole point. We were probably a good 20 or 30 miles up into the mountain when the car slid on ice and the engine died. All at once. Thankfully, it was on a blind corner, so I wasn't going fast enough to flip it. It did get stuck deep in a snowdrift, though. We could open the driver's side doors, but everything in the trunk was stuck there. Once Jenny had finished berating me and Billy stopped laughing, I yanked open the door, telling everyone to get out.
What? What the hell are you on about?
Jenny started, not looking like she wanted to go anywhere. I gestured widely. We're here for the cabin, right? Billy was already unloading guns in the booze cooler from the back seat, pulling it past Jenny while she stared at me. Gotta be round here somewhere, I continued. She just stared as Billy started on the duffels with the food and fireworks.
You know, you ain't the smartest guy,
she started.
But this is like a life or death situation, okay? The car's totaled, we're stranded, and we have no way of calling for help.
I just stood in the snow, shrugging my shoulders. Nah, Jenny. We came out for an adventure. I'm sure we'll be fine. Climbers use these cabins all the time. I bet there's a whole lot of them around here. Billy grinned up from his pile of supplies. Yeah, I vote we go for the cabin. Faced with staying alone in the car, waiting for the battery to die, or following the guys with the supplies, Jenny tagged along too. Billy was able to carry all the rifle bags in the cooler by himself. Great bear of a man that he was. I had 3 of the duffels, 1 on the back and 1 on each arm, and Jenny only had her backpack. But hey, we're gentlemen. Was fine for her too. She had her ski pants and jacket. Me and Billy were in jeans and flannel shirts. We had thermals and a few layers, but it was getting pretty cold and trudging through knee-deep snow was wet and nasty. Luckily, my feet were numb after about half an hour, so it felt less painful. Now, the question of where we was headed had come up, but I'd led us downhill, towards dense tree cover and the dark valleys that were all around here. They say follow water downstream to civilization, but in the snow, the water's kind of everywhere, so just heading randomly downhill into uninhabited woodlands seemed a sensible move. It was quite pretty beneath the pines. The snow lay nestled in their branches, and the layer on the ground was thin, letting us walk as normally as possible with numb legs like Billy and I. After a few more minutes, Billy stopped abruptly, and I walked straight into his back. Then Jenny clattered into me, and the 2 of us fell in a heap. But the smile on his face and his big shining eyes made us leap right back up.
What is it? A road? Rescue?
Jenny asked. Better, he replied. Look! He pointed ahead, and there, in a clearing, was a cabin. It wasn't the little one-room affair of my dad's stories. This was actually a rather sprawling, decrepit single-story house of wood, so old it had turned grey, and where the windows were thick with an unclean layer of gunk. Good find, Billy. Let's get inside. The front door was the same sickly-looking old wood, and it was locked up tight. I tried the windows, even walked all the way round and tried the back door. Nothing budged. There was an outhouse, though. Real cowboy-type shit. Well, nothing stops Billy and I when we put our brain cells to something. Even as we stood shivering, I knew we had another solution. Give it a kick, Billy. His massive foot smashed through the door, sending splintered planks and wood chips everywhere. The cold followed us in, snaking into the untouched interior with a flurry of snow.
That was dumb,
Jenny said, throwing her bag on the floor.
Now we can't even close the door.
It is pretty cold, I guess. But then I looked and took in the place. Similar doors led to several rooms, and there were old chairs, tables, not to mention the roof and walls. Everything was made of wood, even the big trapdoor in the corner. I smiled. But we can build a fire. A few minutes later, and the little stone hearth on the left had a merry little fire going. Started with Billy's Zippo, some lighter fuel, and most of the destroyed door. We might be dumb, but growing up out here you learn the basics of fire safety. I did move the fireworks bag a bit further away though. A cold breeze was still coming in through the door, but none of us were shivering anymore. I was even starting to get some feeling back in my feet. Jenny, though, had decided to take the Zippo as a makeshift torch and search the dark house. It was just as I was starting to relax and feel good about this trip that she called me from the other room. I told Billy to get some food going and made my way as quietly as possible through the house. In the back room, I found her stood over a desk, reading some old papers in the light of the Zippo. Trying not to disturb her concentration, I moved up behind her in silence and placed a reassuring hand on the back of her neck. Her scream was loud enough to wake the dead, and she jumped so high I could swear she almost concussed herself on a roof beam.
What the fuck? Why the hell are you sneaking up on me?
She groaned, getting up from the floor, retrieving the fallen lighter. Didn't want to disturb. You look real fascinated by that there paper.
Read it.
She thrust the Zippo into my hands, and I tilted it to shine over the page. October 3rd, 1911. The creature we found in the Arctic is, I believe, a parasite of some form, wholly ungodly in its ability to quickly corrupt and twist the living. It is nearly immortal. Only fire forces it to dormancy, in which case it can be handled. The hosts, of course, can be killed by common means, but the veracity of its reproduction and its infectiousness makes it too dangerous to ever again see the light of day. I have sealed it in a jar of spirits, chained and boxed in the basement. If any should ever find this house, then please, by God, do not enter the basement. Huh. Groovy.
What the hell are you talking about?
Jenny asked, looking at me with a smoldering frustration. Dude, who lived here must be like a writer. Maybe that HP Minecraft guy?
Lovecraft was from Rhode Island, dipshit. Besides, no one famous has ever come from Montana. I think this might be real. At the very least, we should avoid the basement until we get rescued.
Hey guys. Billy's voice came from the other room. Come see this weird shit I found in the basement. We sat around the big 10-gallon jar, floating in booze. Jenny says spirits, or alcoholic, was a horrifying thing. It was a long, vaguely pickle-shaped mass the color of flesh, and covered with sprawling, bloody tendrils. $20 and I'll chug it, Billy offered. 10, came my counter.
What the fuck is wrong with you two? The letter said it's some kind of fucked up John Carpenter thing. You'd die.
Fine, Kurt Russell, 50 then, Billy said, crushing his can of Natty Light and reaching into the cooler for another. Jenny rolled her eyes. Well, I offered, ain't really anything else to do round here.
You two idiots are the ones who wanted to do this.
Billy looked at me. Guess we can go hunting in the morning. But I wasn't buying it. Well, what do we do till then? He sat in silence, reflecting on the problems offered by a night without Xbox, football, or YouTube. He nodded. Let's get drunk, light a load of fireworks, and shoot at stuff. Despite Jenny's numerous objections, we at least had a solid plan, and began polishing off as many beers as we could. Drinking keeps you warm anyway. Actually, Jenny said that weren't true, but we were still feeling warm when we grabbed a bunch of fireworks and tried to load up our shotguns with our sloppy motor functions. We had brought our deer rifles for real hunting. Our pair of Remington 870s were really just for giggles. Michael James always said the first rule of gun safety was, have fun. Shame about that negligent discharge. We still leave a few rounds of .38 Special at his grave every year. Jenny decided to stay inside and keep the fire going, which suited us just fine as she was in a shitty mood. So me and Billy dragged our sacks of fireworks out, plus another couple of six-packs, and started having fun. The weather was clear at last, the stars bright. If the moon works anything like the sun, which I assume it does, it was real low, so it must have been pretty early. None of us had watches. We were just blasting off shells at random sticks and branches, shooting some skeet with empty cans, when we started letting off some of the fireworks. Mostly just firecrackers, and the odd screaming rocket at first, as me and Billy shot the shit. So anyways, he went, what's the deal with this creepy cabin in the woods? Dunno. I unloaded a few shells at a pine tree, blasting off bark. Some real Evil Dead type shit. Groovy. Nah, probably just some mad old-timey dude with a jar full of crap. You worried? Nope, he grinned. Everything's going near perfect, I reckon. But I got a little something to make it better. He dug in his gun bag and pulled out a pair of handsome little plastic pots. Behold, our salvation. I looked close, and in the moonlight I could read. Tannerite. Now, if you don't know what Tannerite is, it's just about the most fun you can have with your pants up. I don't know the science, but it's a powder that explodes when you shoot it. Probably some sort of aluminum powder mixed with a nitrate-based reactant to make a pressure-sensitive explosive, but I don't know the science. Gleefully, we mixed it up, and then Billy had the best idea of the night yet. Why don't we just shove it in the middle of all the fireworks? We could light this place up like the 4th of July. I patted the genius man on the back. Billy, my sweetheart, that's the greatest plan I've ever heard. Unfortunately, the shotguns weren't going to cut it, so I headed back in to fetch my rifle.
What are you two idiots up to now?
Jenny asked, looking real tired and eating a can of beans. Nothing, love. Just practicing basic firework safety, I said as I pulled my deer rifle, a Seiko in 6.5 Creedmoor, out of its bag.
You need a rifle for that?
Yep, I said, a bit too drunk to load the thing, but luckily I'd left it loaded with the safety off, just in case of such a drunken shooting season. Gonna blow up the whole pile with some tannerite. Jenny groaned, kind of folding in on herself as put her head in her hands.
We're gonna die out here, aren't we?
I was utterly dumbfounded. What are you talking about? This is all going great. We're having the time of our lives. I don't get why you're being so damn cranky. You on your period or something? For some reason, she didn't like that and turned away, stonewalling me. Well, it was normally best to leave her to sulk, so I staggered back out. 100 feet or so from the cabin, Billy had set up a pile of all the biggest, most illegal, most deadly fireworks we had, and he promised me that 2 pounds of tannerite sat at its heart. I gave him a big hug, thanking him for the best night of my life so far. Then we laid behind a fallen tree, and I took aim. The explosion ripped across the forest, shaking snow from the closest trees. It wasn't the biggest boom, but big enough. And all the fireworks started blasting off. Colors whizzed and screamed through the trees. Rockets wheeled crazily in the sky. It was like some Star Wars shit. For nearly a minute, explosions clapped off all around us, sparks sparkling in every color of the rainbow. I was grinning at Billy in the afterglow. Merry Christmas, bud. Merry Christmas, bro. Then we heard Jenny screaming. We rushed back through the charred snow and shot up trees to see flames burning through the open door to the cabin. Leaping in, I saw Jenny scrabbling to collect what supplies weren't on fire, but it was spreading fast, dry and old as the wood was. Without thinking, eyes stinging from the smoke, I picked up Jenny and dragged her outside.
The jar!
She screamed.
Don't let the jar break!
Valiantly, Billy leapt into the now properly on fire building, grabbing the jar from the last bit of floor that wasn't on fire, as the ammunition I'd left in my gun bag started blasting from the heat. Surrounded by fire and gunshots, Billy leapt out the door into the snow beside us, landing heavily on the jar with a loud, shattering sound. Now, y'all probably didn't know about this, but Billy was, a pretty clumsy guy. So it wasn't too surprising he'd managed to break the jar. I wasn't really focused on that, though. I was staring incredulously at Jenny, silhouetted against the burning building. What the hell did you do? I managed to get out.
Me?
She shrieked.
What the fuck is wrong with you? Your stupid fucking firework flew in through the door and exploded in the fire. The place went up in seconds. This is your fault.
Hey, I said, backing up from a fury. This ain't our fault. What are the chances of firework making that shot? It's a straight up act of God. Guys, I don't feel too good. Billy's voice came from his prone form. Jenny rushed to him, rolling him onto his back. He didn't look so good either. His shirt and layers were all torn up on his front, and the thing from the broken jar was fused to his chest, pulsating and writhing as his veins and arteries darkened to a bloody color. You think I could walk it off? He whispered, as he started to shake and his ribs cracked and bones groaned. Sure, buddy.
What the fuck?
Jenny muttered.
Please, one of you must have brought a phone. We need to call an ambulance or something. Oh God. Oh God, oh God.
I said as Billy started convulsing, flesh on his arms tearing as they grew long and thin. Billy'll be just fine. He's strong as an oak, ain't that right, Billy? His arms were now 5 feet long, tipped with deadly-looking claws, whilst his chest had spread even broader, flesh bubbling until he was built like a linebacker. See? Strong as ever. But Jenny was backing up, tears streaming down her face. I leaned real close to Billy's bloated, rippling head as he stopped shaking. Right, buddy? In that instant, his head split vertically from his hairline down his neck to the top of his chest, and opened with an unearthly shriek to reveal a line of serrated teeth and a maw that reminded me of my ex. I leapt away, grabbing Jenny's hand and dashing through the forest, back towards where we'd left our fireworks supplies. Damn! I was overcome with surprise, revulsion, and horror. Billy really had gone full Resident Evil on us.
Oh, God.
Jenny said quietly, pointing back the way we came. Billy was heading over, shambling and shrieking in the night, steam rising from his vertical mouth, pulling himself forward, long clawed arms digging into the trees as he used them for support.
We're gonna die. We're gonna die.
She kept repeating, shaking like a leaf. I wasn't worried as much as kinda sad. The shambling, monstrous Billy saw us, eyes bulging, and then they distended from his head on phallic stalks, looking right at me. Poor Billy looked in pain. I looked at my feet, and there was his trusty boomstick. I grabbed it, heaving it up. Good old Billy had left it loaded, chambered, and with the safety off, just like Uncle James taught us. My throat caught as I looked for some final words from my best buddy. In another life, I said, as he clawed through the woods just a few feet from me now, I would have loved to explore each other's bodies. The buckshot blasted apart his already bisected head, and with a groan like a falling tree, he slammed to the ground, steaming in the snow. His body sagged, reverting back to a more human-like form. Jenny and I went up to him, looking at the mess of gore that had been Billy. In the firelight, something was writhing in his ruined face. Jenny leapt into action.
Quick!
She grabbed his ankles.
We gotta throw him in the fire. It's the only way to stop the parasite.
Well, the note had said that, so I grabbed him under the shoulders and together we hefted the 6'5" body back to the raging inferno that had been our cabin. His blood and brains were running warm down my front, but I took no notice. I was focused on the writhing mass of tentacles trying to wriggle out of my buddy's skull cavity. Just as the thing was about to get free, we chucked him in the blaze. Instantly, the thing started squealing like a pig with its nuts stuck in a gate. There was a rancid smell of burning hair, which soon gave way to a scent just like the summer hog roast. Jenny cried and cried, wrapped in my arms as the sun started to rise. A few hours later, we were back at my house. You see, we descended the mountain on the wrong side. Turns out we were only a couple of hours from town after all. Oh well, that's how things go sometimes. Luckily, my dad was at work, so we cleaned up and I made breakfast. Jenny wasn't eating any bacon or sausage. More for me, I guessed. After that, Jenny insisted on calling the police. And that's when things got bad. Turns out, Jenny's family had filed a missing persons report last night, so as the officers arrived, they explained I was facing kidnapping charges. Everyone had been called in to help search for her. They really weren't happy to be working on Christmas. She was practically catatonic at this point, just kind of shaking and staring at her plate. Then the questions came up about what happened, and I knew the cops wouldn't buy the whole evil ancient Arctic parasite jar story. So I said we went on a hunting trip with Billy and had a little accident. They took Jenny to the station, and now they've gone to look for the remains of the cabin now. And I'm just sitting here waiting for them to find all the horrors we left there. So yeah, probably going down for kidnapping. Definitely for murder. And they may or may not bring that parasite back with them. All in all, I think everything went about as well as it could have. But this is probably still the worst Christmas ever. Not sure what the takeaway is from all this. It ain't like a story with a message. Me and Billy did everything right, made all the right choices, and now he's dead and I'm going to be arrested. I'm sure Jenny would disagree, but what does she know? It's like that bald guy from Star Trek says, you can do everything right and still lose. That ain't weakness, it's just life. See you around, and Merry Christmas. I'm being followed by a snowman. It's the only thing that knows what I did. It was a soiree, not a party. That's what Anna told everyone as she dished out canapes and played the perfect host. It was just a few days until Christmas, and snowing like I hadn't seen since childhood. The frost that had pacified the window panes only made the inside of Anna's Tudor home feel even more warm. I sat in a leather chair and supped on my brandy while I looked out at the night. The neighbors' Christmas lights blinked red and green, and it was still snowing, more gentle now than in the morning. I sighed, knowing that would be the weather I walked home in. There was a quiet din of casual conversation that filled the room, accompanied by the Christmas with the Rat Pack CD playing in the background, as it had been on repeat since I arrived. It was a nice evening, although I wasn't really one for socializing. I came as a favor for my sister Anna, just to help her fill seats for her little dinner party. I finished the large brandy and set the empty glass down on the doily-covered windowsill. It was nice visiting my old home, but seeing this chair without my dad sat in it just didn't feel right. His absence was an eyesore. I caught Anna's eye and nodded my goodbye. She smiled in return, happy that I stayed this long. I shrugged past someone I didn't bother to meet and got to the front door. Annoyingly, half a dozen other coats covered my own. I rummaged through the waterproof mound, accidentally dropping a few to the floor as I did, until I found my jacket. I pulled it on me, zipped it up tight, and took my hat from the pocket. I then borrowed a pair of Anna's gloves which had been lying on the radiator and made a nice addition to the warm ensemble. With that, I opened the door and heaved myself into the cold night. I was immediately hit by the chill. The warmth of the old house abandoned me, and I pulled my collar high as I began to trudge down the icy pavement. Snowflakes still fell, dancing in the air as they did. I ignored them, though, preferring to keep my head down as I walked the empty streets. I live in a small, affluent town in the south of England. Every antiquated house was decorated with lights and the occasional plastic reindeer, but as to keep up appearances, they made an effort to avoid seeming tacky. The year was 2006, and the street lamps still ran on sodium vapor rather than modern LEDs. Their orange-yellow glow enveloped me and gave the bitterly cold night a warm facade. As the moon was shrouded, they offered the only source of light. As such, I had to avoid the usual alleys and cut-throughs, which lay in total darkness. This added another 10 minutes onto my walk home. But I didn't mind. I enjoyed walking alone at night, especially when I knew no one else would be out in this weather. It gave me time to think about my past, which was a rare privilege. I can remember turning a corner as I started to walk up another street, which was on a fairly steep incline. Planted on the small front garden of one of the semi-detached houses was a snowman. The two large spheres which made up its body had half melted and were refrozen into one. Two branches with an uncanny resemblance to the real thing had been expertly picked out to become the snowman's arms. A gnarled carrot acted as its nose, and its eyes and crooked smile were fashioned from small lumps of coal. A moth-bitten blue scarf was wrapped around the snowman's stumpy neck, a child's endeavor to protect it from the cold. I passed it without a second thought, other than to recall the many snowmen I constructed annually in my youth. The icy ground only added to the difficulty of scaling the hillside street. It was the first of many inclines I'd encounter, as my hometown was nestled among the chalk hills of the South Downs. It really was a beautiful part of the country, and suffered infrequently from snowstorms like this. When they did occur, however, they blanketed the fields in frost, giving them the same pallid complexion as the chalk cliffs. I passed a house where a party was being held, and heard Christmas pop seeping from the red brick walls. I walked from shadow into the light cast by the house's front windows, then back into shadow. Slowly, the din of the festivities faded, and mixed with the harsh wind. I walked along the snow-covered streets, avoiding the pavement that had been turned slippery by frozen gutter water. It was near the end of this particular row of houses, built just south of the old prison, that I saw it again. The snowman. Erected on the small patch of grass next to a driveway that barely passed for a garden, it looked nearly identical to the one before. In fact, it was. Same eyes, same smile, same scarf being tattered in the wind. I frowned at his similarities to the previous snowman, but didn't stop to consider it further. I continued my way home, crossing the empty road over to the miniature park that lay in the center of the red brick estate. It, too, was frosted over, and the petrified grass crunched under boot heel as I walked. Around halfway, I looked over my shoulder. The mist had eaten anything that lay more than 10 paces behind me. I looked forward again, and continued. I lived my entire life here, and worked at the brewery that was at the heart of the town. I was often on delivery duty, and knew the place like the back of my hand. As such, making my way home with little visibility was easier than it sounded. And I was no more than a shortcut through a park away from my home. My fingers felt numb, and I kept my hands lodged between my armpits for warmth. My breath came out like steam from an old train, a constant reminder, if I needed one, of the chill. I couldn't wait to step into my shower and let warm water subsume me. My path was stopped, however. A snowman came lurching into view from out of the mist. It was somehow constructed in the dead center of the road, busy by day, and had the same appearance as the last two I passed. The exact same. There was really no denying it. I can remember thinking as I approached it. It was identical to the other snowmen. It was them. I now stood directly in front of it. It was at eye level, but I could only see blackness coming from his lumps of coal. I took a step back and looked it up and down. The only difference I could make out was this increase in height, which was slight but noticeable. I soon came to the conclusion that a group of kids from the same clique at their school had committed to making these same snowmen around town, perhaps in reference to a piece of media. The answer was sufficient for me back then, before I encountered what sees behind those coals. I left this third snowman and continued walking towards the frozen park. By virtue of being born a man, in a place free from poverty, I never really felt afraid walking alone at night. But as I left that third snowman in my wake, I felt the hand of fear on my shoulder. I couldn't pinpoint its source, although my eyes now flickered around my grayscale surroundings. my brain turning every shape into an assailant. My pace hurried as I crossed the green fields and past the children's play park that lay on its far side. The silhouettes of the slides and climbing walls lingered in my mind as I pulled the woolen hat tighter around my skull. For some reason, it occurred to me at that moment that if someone was sprinting toward me from the darkness, I wouldn't hear them past the wind. This realization in my mind, I hurried up onto the concrete and held my breath as I passed under the bridge. Houses lurched from my surroundings. I now walked between people's homes yet again, a family dwelling in each. This reassured my scattered mind, as the thoughts of my own home became its only occupant. My house was one in a row of semi-detached houses built along the side of a hill that continued up to the downs, and looked out over the main road. A slate path connected the house to another, almost vertical, slate path which led down into a minuscule parking area. Because of this geographical hostility, very few old people or families with young, wandering children lived in these cliffside houses. Most of the occupants were singletons like me, ranging from their 20s to their 60s. For me, this was home, and it was now only a minute walk away. I emerged from my final street. The main road, usually eternally busy, was now empty, and covered in ankle-high snow bisected by a solitary tire track. I relished being able to cross without waiting an age, and made a show of it. I danced in the middle of the road, twirling and spinning, my arms in the air and my feet skirting the slippery asphalt. I opened my eyes and came to stop, inches from a snowman. It stood stationary in the middle of the road. Wooden arms swayed and a tattered blue scarf blew in the direction of the wind. I backed up a few steps in horror. It hadn't been there seconds before. "What?" I muttered to myself. My words escaped me, accompanied by a trail of frozen breath. I stared at the snowman who'd been following me this entire time, usually just out of view. It stood there. I put a gloved hand to my forehead, unbelieving, and what was right in front of me. I wanted to touch it. I had to touch it. That was the only way to prove it was really there, and not just a hallucinatory figment of hypothermia. As my hand approached the icy surface, I became unsure as to which option was worse. Then, my wool-covered fingertips made contact. It was real, all right. A sudden clarity came, so intense I felt my head begin to ache. I staggered back as I realized I'd seen this snowman years ago. I turned to run, but slipped on the frozen tarmac and landed hard on my front. I groaned and pushed myself up, thick blood dripping from my nose and turning the snow red. I looked up and saw the snowman, which was now in front of me again. I scrambled back on my hands and knees, then lurched to my feet. It had moved. I was now certain. Not taking my eyes off it, I walked to the side in a crescent motion and reached the foot of the steep walkway. I looked away from the snowman, ascending the path as quickly as possible on the slick stone. I stopped halfway and turned to see if it had followed. I searched the white landscape, expecting to see it peeping from behind every tree or street lamp. It was gone. I let a cold breath out and turned. The snowman was in front of me once again, blocking my path. I took a step back in fear, almost slipping back down the way I came. Panicking, I ducked under the rustling handrail and began to crawl up the inclined hill. Frozen blades of grass shattered under my body weight as I went, eventually reaching even ground. I clambered into a run and didn't stop until I reached my front door. I tore my gloves off and buried my hands in my pockets, desperately feeling for any keys. I glanced behind me as I did. The snowman now stood at the foot of the steps that led up to my door, just a meter away. I turned back around as I found the keys, and fumbled them into the lock. I suddenly felt a chill envelop my spine. This time, however, it wasn't from fear. It felt like I had pressed the bare skin of my back against a cold metal wall. The snowman was directly behind me. The door swung open, and I fell inside. I slapped it shut with my boot, got up and quickly locked it. I tried the handle, making sure it wouldn't budge. I ran through the door to my left into the living room, and straight to the wide window. From where my house was, I could see down the white hill to the main road. On the far side of it was a frozen pavement and a large brick wall, twice my height, that had only frosted overgrowth behind it. The cars at the base of the hill were covered in snow, and it was as I looked at them did I realize that the blizzard had finally stopped. I scoured every inch of the view. The snowman was nowhere to be seen. Once I was absolutely certain of this fact, I uneasily climbed upstairs, went into my bedroom, and collapsed in a heap. Every time it has snowed since, I have become a recluse. I refuse to leave my house until the last of it melts, and even then I'm weary. Every time it has snowed since, it has gotten closer to the house. The first snowfall of December began earlier today, which prompted me to finally write this. I'm scared this visit will be its last. I didn't mean to kill her. I was 19 and staying at a friend's holiday home in rural Scotland, along with half a dozen other similarly aged lads. There was a blizzard that year too, one that hit the area we were staying particularly hard. I was sent out for a last-minute expedition to the nearest off-license. I borrowed an old van we found on the grounds, which I ended up setting fire to later that night. I drove into town, but alas, all the shops had closed early. By the time I was driving back to the house, the blizzard was already in full swing. Not only was I drunk driving, I was driving while drinking. I had a can in one hand and the wheel in the other. Numerous houses dotted the stretch of forested road up our holiday home, mostly owned by those with considerable wealth. Big gardens gave way to even bigger buildings, always Gothic in structure, that I would gawk at as I drove past. I found out the full story just under a year later. Her parents were overprotective, and didn't let her out that day. She was liable to catch a cold, they said. But the snow has a magical lure to children, and that's why when her parents went to bed that night, she sneaked out. She pulled on her Wellingtons, her coat, and her favorite blue scarf. A warm pair of gloves, too. She crept downstairs and as quietly as she could, unlocked the front door, and entered a winter wonderland. It was nirvana for her. After a while frolicking and forming a heavenly host of snow angels, she set her attention on the main event, building a snowman. A small ball was soon rolled out to form the large base, and another was similarly crafted to fit atop it. The little girl took extra care in making the head, and once it was sufficiently spherical, she got on her tippy toes and placed it like a crown on the snow body. The snowman was built at the very end of her garden, just in case an awoken parent happened to glance out the window. She was hidden in the mist and snow, with only the full moon to illuminate her own little world. A carrot she'd cleverly taken to bed with her was stuck in to be used for the nose. The nearby coal shed served as a source for the snowman's mouth and eyes. It needed one more thing: arms. She went to the house's black cast-iron gates and slowly opened a gap just wide enough for her to squeeze through. Then she crossed the road to the forest that lay on the other side. She was too afraid to venture deep into the woods, but thankfully plenty of fallen branches were in reach. She took two back and slotted them into place. She then stood back to admire her handiwork, and realized one of them was crooked. She shivered, not for the first time that night, and took it out. Then she made her way back out the front gate and to the tree line. Quickly discarding the previous branch, she found one with much more of a resemblance to a human arm. Overjoyed, she turned across the road. That's when I drove into her. In the flash of an eye and the screech of a brake pad, her short life was over. The van came to a sudden stop along with her heartbeat. I sat there, clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles were so white, I thought they had torn clean through the skin. My mouth opened and closed like a beached fish, gasping for air, but I didn't say a word. Eventually, I undid my seatbelt and got out, both snow and gravel crunching underfoot. I tried to look at her body, but couldn't. It didn't look like a human anymore. I could only make out where her head ended and her crumpled chest began from the tattered blue scarf she wore. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone. This was it. I'd been caught, and my life would never be the same. I can explain. She ran out in front of me. I barely managed to choke out. It wasn't my fault. The witness stood still, judging me. Only a stone wall and the noise of the harsh wind stood between us. As my eyes sharpened to the pale moonlight, I realized who had seen me. It was a snowman, as lifeless as the young girl. In that moment of realization, I almost laughed to myself. Instead, I began to cry. I knew it would stay silent. I could actually get away with this. Then I saw a light turn on in the house. Reality struck me, and I ran back to the van and leapt behind the wheel. While I was gone, my friends had found a stash of old malt whiskey in the cellar. When I arrived, half of them were asleep, and the rest had the cognitive function of the first half. They couldn't speak beyond slurred moans and certainly couldn't recall my absence to the police the next morning. I did get away with it. I really did. I was hysterical in the aftermath, but learnt to bury any memory of what happened. I tried never to dwell, and eternally told myself that it was an uncontrollable accident. That night in 2006 was the first time seeing my silent witness since it had happened. It has been following me ever since, getting a little closer every time it snows. I have no idea what it's going to do when it finds me in here. But I fear I'm about to find out, for I have just heard the tapping of a tree branch against my window. My job is to sort letters to Santa. There's only one rule. I worked at the post office 2 weeks ago. That's not a euphemism, and it's not meant to sound mysterious. I've been there since I was 21, sorting, scanning, moving things from one place to another so other people can forget about them. It's stable work, quiet work, the kind of job where nothing interesting is supposed to happen. Every year, around mid-November, I get rotated into a seasonal role. Officially, I'm assigned to the No Response division. Unofficially, I'm the person who sorts the letters addressed to Santa that will never receive an answer. Most people don't realize how many of those come in. Kids still write physical letters. Parents still encourage it. Schools still make it an activity. By the time those envelopes reach us, they're already dead ends. Addresses that don't exist. Names that aren't real. Return labels written in blocky pencil handwriting. The machinery flags them automatically. They get pulled before routing and dropped into our department. We don't respond to them. We don't forward them to charities. We don't read them in full. That last part is the rule. It's been a rule since the late 90s, according to my supervisor. Long before I started, long before she did. The explanation they give during training is simple and rehearsed. Children sometimes write about personal matters in their letters. Family issues, home situations. It's not our place to read private information that was not meant for us. So we skim. We confirm it's addressed to Santa, stamp it as no response, log it, and file it away. You're allowed to read the opening line, maybe two. You're not allowed to finish it. Ever. People joke about it the first year. They think it's superstition, or some old HR leftover nobody bothered to remove. Somebody always asks what happens if you do finish one. The supervisor never answers directly. She just says it results in immediate termination. I believed that was all it meant for a long time. I stopped finding the rule funny 3 Christmases ago. That was when I learned what happens after termination. It's a tight-knit secret among the people who get roped into it, and you're only told after everyone thinks you won't say anything to anyone. They don't escort you out with security. They don't make a scene. You're just told to gather your things and leave the building. Your credentials are deactivated sometime later that day. Your access to internal systems disappears. To everyone else, it looks like you quit or got fired for something mundane. What happens next isn't in any handbook. It starts the same way every time. Within a day or two, the person mentions they feel watched. Maybe they laugh it off at first and blame stress. Then they describe something taller than it should be, standing too far away to make sense. A shape. A silhouette that doesn't move when they move. By the 4th or 5th day, they stop laughing. They all describe it the same way. A black figure, at least 12 feet tall, proportioned wrong, hands stretched to its shins, standing upright like it's pretending to be human. It wears a Santa hat. A real one. Red, white trim, cheap felt. The hat never changes. It never falls. It never reacts to weather. It doesn't chase them. It doesn't speak. Every day, it's a little closer. It can stand across the street, at the end of a grocery aisle, on a sidewalk in full daylight. Other people walk through it like it isn't there. Nobody notices it. Nobody reacts. That's how they know it's meant only for them. The stalking lasts 12 days. On the 13th, they die. The post office doesn't acknowledge the connection. Officially, those people suffer unrelated accidents or medical emergencies. Unofficially, nobody in no response breaks the rule anymore. Except, I did. Because some of the letters aren't normal. Every once in a while, rare, but often enough that we dread it, you find a crumpled envelope sealed with red wax instead of glue. No postage, no return address. Just a name written carefully in pencil, as if the writer didn't want to risk spelling it wrong. Those letters are the reason the rule exists. We're meant to set them aside in the locked drawer and alert supervision immediately. No logging, no scanning. They are taken at the end of the month. Every single one of them is addressed to Santa. I'd seen 11 in my entire career before last week. The 12th had my nephew's name on it. Same first name, same last name. Even the way the pencil curved on the first letter looked wrong in a familiar way. My brother has a 7-year-old son. He writes his name the same way on birthday cards. Too big at the front, trailing smaller letters like he gets tired halfway through. I didn't open it right away. I stood there for a long time, staring at the seal, telling myself coincidences happen and kids share names. I told myself that red wax meant nothing. That plenty of children have uncles who work at the post office. I used a sick day and left immediately and drove straight to my brother's house. He laughed when I told him the envelope. Told me I was overthinking it. Said his kid probably found his wax stamp he used for work and wanted to be fancy. When I asked if his son had written a letter to Santa recently, his smile faded just a little. He said yes, but he didn't see anything alarming. Just the usual stuff. Toys, candy, video games. He asked why I cared so much. I didn't have an answer that didn't sound insane. That night, I dreamed about the drawer at work. It was open, and the letter was gone. The next morning, I broke the rule. I told myself I'd only read enough to confirm it wasn't really his. I told myself I'd stop if it got personal. I told myself I wouldn't finish it. I was wrong. The letter was written in pencil, neat but deliberate. No spelling mistakes, no childish phrasing. It thanked Santa. It thanked him for the last gift. Not for toys or games, but for a piece of candy that had made Mommy stop crying. It said Santa had been right, that doing the bad thing worked, and nobody knew. It promised that this time would be even better, that stealing wouldn't be enough, and hurting animals felt too small now that he understood what Santa really wanted. It listed sins like chores. It ended by asking what Santa wanted next, because Christmas was coming, and he wanted to be a good boy. I don't remember putting that letter down. I only remember my supervisor standing behind me, telling me to hand over my badge. She didn't argue. She didn't yell. She looked tired, like she'd seen this exact situation before and hated it every time. She told me I was terminated for violating confidentiality policy and that I needed to leave the building immediately. She didn't warn me about anything else. I didn't leave work right away. I sat in my car in the parking lot for almost an hour with the letter in my lap. I kept expecting someone to knock on the window and tell me that this had gone far enough, that whatever point they were trying to make had landed and I could come back inside. No one did. People clocked out as time went on, walked past my car without looking twice. I drove to my brother's house because there wasn't anywhere else it made sense to go. He answered the door with the son still awake behind him, cartoon voices echoing down the hallway. The normalcy of it made what I was holding feel obscene, like I brought something diseased into a clean room. I asked if we could talk privately. He hesitated, then stepped outside with me, shutting the door behind him. "Why are you holding Lucas's letter?" We were standing on the porch. The light above us flickered every few seconds. I hadn't noticed it doing that before. "It came to my work," I said. "I need you to read it." "You open my kid's mail?" "Yes, but you'll understand when you open it." That made it worse, somehow. He took the envelope from my hand and turned it over, frowning at the wax seal. What is this? Some kind of joke? Seriously, read it. He broke the seal with his thumb and started scanning the page. I watched his eyes move, line by line. When he stopped, he stared at the paper like he'd lost his place. "This isn't funny," he said. "I know." He folded the letter once. "Did you write this shit?" "No." "Did you put him up to this?" "No." "You really expect me to believe this came from a real—" He stopped himself, laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You can't be serious, Matt." "I got fired today. I wouldn't risk my job for something like this." "That doesn't help." "I tried not to read it. I wasn't supposed to, but when I saw his name—" "You're talking about rules again," he said. "That stupid Santa rule you're always on about this time of year?" "It's not stupid," I said. "It's a thing for a reason." "So now my son is the reason?" His voice was louder now. Behind him, the TV laughed on cue. "You think my own son is fucking hurting people?" "No," I said quickly. "I think something is asking him to." He stared at me, waiting for a grin that didn't come. "You're fucking sick, man," he said, finally after staring daggers at me. "It's been happening to other people, co-workers. Once you finish one of the letters I took, this is enough. You don't get to come into my house and say ridiculous shit like this. Just listen to me, just for once, can you? You need help, Matt. Seriously. You're fucking crazy." "There's a thing." My voice dropped without me meaning it to. "It starts watching you. Tall. Wears a Santa hat. 12 days and then get out. Don't talk about my son like that. Don't talk to me unless you get your shit together." "I'm not talking about him," I said. "I'm talking about what's coming." He opened the door behind him. "Stay out of my fucking house. And don't come back until you can admit you made this up." "But Christmas, don't," he said. "Do not bring that bullshit into my home." I stepped back further onto the porch. He didn't hesitate before closing the door. The lock clicked. Behind the door, my nephew laughed at something on the TV. In the silence that followed, the flickering porch light finally went out. At the end of the street, something tall stood perfectly still, waiting. I left my brother's house, not taking my eyes off of it. When I got home, it stood across the street from my apartment, partially hidden by a lamppost that only reached its upper thigh. The Santa hat sat perfectly on its head, bright red against a body that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. I didn't see it move. I watched from my living room window until my eyes started to hurt, until my reflection layered itself over the dark glass and made me doubt the shape even existed. When I looked away and looked back again, it was still at the end of the street, standing just past the stop sign. Cars drove past it without slowing. Headlights cut through its legs and came out the other side unchanged. A woman jogged directly through the space it occupied, earbuds in, breath fogging in the cold air. She never noticed the height of the thing she'd passed. That night, I didn't close the curtains. I wanted to know if it would approach while I slept, if it only moved when I wasn't looking. It didn't move. The Santa hat was the brightest thing on the street. On the second day, it was closer. It stood across from my building beneath a street lamp. The light didn't reveal anything, only trace its outline like something pasted onto the world. I left early, before sunrise, telling myself that if I passed it quickly enough, I could prove it couldn't interact with me. As I walked by, I felt pressure behind my eyes, like I was remembering something I'd forgotten. It lasted less than a second. When I turned, it was still behind me. That night, I dreamed of red wax softening in my hands. On the third day, it was in the parking lot. It stood between my car and the exit. I walked around it without stopping. I remember feeling angry more than afraid. Angry that it was allowed to exist like this, violating the basic rules of proximity and consequence. A man leaned against my car to tie his shoe. His shoulder passed through its leg without comment. For a moment, by habit, I drove toward the post office before remembering I no longer worked there. On the fourth day, it began appearing indoors. I saw it at the end of the frozen food aisle, its head nearly brushing the hanging signs. People pushed carts through it. A child ran past me laughing when the cold air hit their face. I left my groceries and walked out. That night, Christmas music started to feel like a warning. On the fifth day, it followed me to my brother's street. It stood on the sidewalk in front of his porch, feet almost touching the step. I watched my brother walk through that space later, holding his son's hand. Not slowing, not noticing. The porch light turned on. The door closed. The thing didn't leave. On the sixth day, I stopped trying to explain. I called the non-emergency line, a therapist, anyone who might give this a shape that wasn't fatal. I talked about stress, unemployment, anxiety. Everyone heard exactly what they needed to hear. That night, it stood at the edge of my building's lot, closer than before. I closed the curtains for the first time and still woke up convinced something brushed the walls. On the seventh day, it was in the elevator to my apartment. The doors opened and it was already there, folded just enough to fit. A woman stepped in beside me and leaned against its leg without realizing it, frowning slightly at the unexpected cold. I got off 2 floors early. The rest of the ride creaked like it was carrying more weight than it should. On the 8th day, it appeared in reflections first. In the dark screen of my phone, in the microwave door, always behind me. When I turned, it was in the room where it needed to be to remain just out of reach. I never heard it breathe. On the 9th day, it stopped giving me space. I turned corners and almost walked into it. I started holding my hands out in front of me, afraid of colliding with it like misplaced furniture. That night, it stood at the foot of my bed and leaned forward just enough to make the Santa hat dip. I didn't sleep. On the 10th day, I tried to leave the city. I drove until the roads thinned and the lights fell away. I locked myself in a rest stop bathroom just to breathe. It waited by the sinks. I turned around and went home. On the 11th day, it no longer followed me. It waited in places before I arrived, positioned where it made sense, as if it had always been part of the layout. If it has eyes, I never saw them. If it has a face, I don't think I would survive seeing it. On the 12th day, it stood in my bedroom. Not at the foot of the bed. Closer. It bent at the waist until its head filled my vision. I smelled wax. I smelled paper. The Santa hat slid forward just enough that I thought I might finally see what was underneath. Then it folded itself back into the corner, impossibly small, and waited with me until morning. Tomorrow is the 13th day. He's standing just a few feet in front of me now. I'm going to die tomorrow night. I need help. Anything. Please. Hi there. I hope you're staying warm this winter. Very cold times indeed. Very cold. These stories were. I was there when they sealed the Kola Superdeep Borehole. We never should have dug that deep. By A2 Pro 75. Second story, me and my buddy's Christmas trip took a turn for the worst. By Cultural Flow 9395. Third story, I'm being followed by a snowman. It's the only thing that knows what I did. By the White Mare. Lastly, my job is to sort letters to Santa. There's only one rule. By Extra Evening 9354. I really hope you've enjoyed these stories this wonderful holiday season. And, well, what did you think? Do you think you would have survived all of these encounters? I personally think they were pretty great stories, pretty creepy, pretty freaky, all in a slightly different way from each other. Very interesting and perfect for this time of year. Stay warm, stay bundled up, enjoy your holidays and your loved ones. And I've been Nate at Night. I'll catch you next time. I've got a